Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michelle Wallace. Today, I'm 82 years old, and you are looking at a survivor. 82 years is a long journey. Everyone here in Charlottesville, Virginia, knows me as a sweet grandmother who loves to crochet. They see me going to church, making pecan pies, and playing with my great-granddaughter, Layla. They see the light, but they don't see the steel and leather girdle I was forced to wear for months on end. They don't know about that stormy night in January 1961, when I lay alone on a cold bed, struggling to give birth to a child whom my own father, a powerful man in this region, was determined to kill while he was still inside me. I was once a captive in my own home. I thought I would die on that farm, but my son, James, did the impossible. He survived, and with his undeniable eyes alone, he drove the devil out of my life forever. This isn't just a personal story. This is living proof that light can conquer darkness, and that even the most horrific things can come to an end. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. Now, my dears, before I continue, I want to share a piece of my current joy. I live here in Charlottesville, Virginia, in a small house in the Riverbend neighborhood, right near the church, close to my children and grandchildren. My great-granddaughter, Layla, is 6 years old and loves when I make those little crochet flowers for her. Seeing these happy, free children, that is priceless. This pure freedom is what I fought for, and it's the hope I want to share with you. Now, let me tell you the story of how I found it. My story begins on the farm where I was born, a time when things were very different from today. I was born in 1943. I know that year was marked by the height of World War II. But on the isolated farm, we barely knew what was happening in the world. At that time, life was dictated only by the seasons and the demands of the plantation. And at the center of this story is a man who should have protected me, but who became my worst nightmare. The Oakwood plantation was about 15 miles from Charlottesville, going up the foothills, in an area with enormous oak trees and fog that descended every evening. It was a large property for raising cattle and harvesting black walnuts. My father, Colonel Frank Wallace, owned all of it. He wasn't an army colonel, no. He was one of those old-style colonels, a title bought by a man with power and money in the region. Everyone in Charlottesville knew the Odd-Eye Colonel. That was his nickname. My dears. Odd-Eye, because my father was born with a rare condition called heterochromia, had eyes like that, and who had died when I was very little. I didn't really get to know her, but I heard the maids whispering that her death had been sudden, too quiet, and the burial far too quick. Oh, my dears, that is the thing that always haunted me. On an isolated farm, deaths that are too quiet are never natural. Can't you see? Even as a child, my heart sensed a truth that had been buried too quickly, just like the poor woman herself. The farmhouse was large, made of thick wood. The farmhouse was large, made of thick wood, with a long hallway that creaked when you walked through it. There was a huge living room with a stone fireplace, where my father received the other landowners to play poker and drink bourbon. The kitchen was separated from the main house, so the smoke wouldn't smell up the rest of the house. And in the back were the bedrooms, 3 in total. The largest was my father's and mother's, the middle one was mine, and the smallest was for Ruby, the maid who lived with us. My mother's name was Sarah Wallace. She was a tiny woman, with delicate hands and a gentle voice. She came from a family of merchants in Charlottesville and had married my father when she was only 16 years old. I was an only child. I didn't have any siblings. My mother had lost 2 babies before me, and after I was born, the doctors said she couldn't have any more children. I think that's why my father always treated me differently, you know? I was his only heir, the only one who would carry the Wallace name forward. When I was very young, until about 9 or 10, life on the farm was actually good. My mother took care of me with all the affection in the world. She taught me to embroider. She taught me to make bread. She told me stories of saints and angels while we peeled potatoes in the kitchen. Ruby was like a second mother to me. She had a son, Dylan, who was my age, and we played together behind the house. We climbed the oak trees, even though my mother forbade it, and stayed up there watching the fog cover the valley. We collected black walnuts that had fallen on the ground, and Ruby would roast them for us to eat warm with sea salt. My father at that time was a reserved, serious man. but he wasn't bad to me. He spent the entire day dealing with the cattle, talking to the farm hands, managing the plantation's affairs. When he came home at night, he ate dinner silently and went to sleep. On the weekends, he went to the city to play cards with his friends. He barely looked at me. I was my mother's concern, but everything changed, my darling. Everything changed when I was 10 years old. The loss of her mother stripped Michelle of her shield, leaving her alone to face a darkness she hadn't yet named. This sudden shift was the true beginning of her captivity. You won't believe the chilling way her father began to assert control. Stay with us to hear how she endured this fear. It was the winter of 1953. A terrible winter, with a freeze that killed the crops and a cold that cut through the skin. My mother started coughing. At first, it was a dry cough that she tried to hide with a handkerchief, but in 2 weeks, the cough worsened. Then came the fever, then blood in her mouth, tuberculosis, they said. In those days, there was no easy cure, my dears. We watched her waste away until she was gone. I remember the day my mother died, as if it were today. It was a morning in January. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. I woke up to Ruby's scream calling my father. I ran to their bedroom and saw my mother in bed, pale, her eyes closed, a thread of blood at the corner of her mouth. Ruby pulled me out, but I had seen her. I had seen my mother dead. The burial was on a rainy Saturday. Half of Charlottesville came to the farm. My father didn't cry. He stood beside the coffin, with those odd-colored eyes, staring into nowhere, his mouth set in a hard line. I cried all afternoon, clinging to Ruby's skirt. After we buried my mother in the city cemetery, my father changed. My dears, he changed in a frightening way. He stopped leaving the house, stopped receiving friends, and sent most of the farmhands away. It was just him, me, Ruby, and Dylan on the farm. The house became silent, heavy, as if a sleeping beast was curled up in the corners, and that's when he started looking at me differently. It wasn't that fatherly look that barely noticed his daughter anymore. It was a prolonged, studied gaze that gave me a chill in my stomach that wasn't from the cold wind of Charlottesville. When I passed him in the hallway, he would stop what he was doing and follow me with his eyes until I disappeared from sight. When I sat down for lunch, he would watch me chew in silence, with that green eye and that brown eye glued to me. Ruby noticed. I saw her notice. She started keeping me close to her at all times. In the kitchen, in the yard, washing clothes at the basin. She no longer let me be alone in any room of the house. And when my father called Michelle from the end of the hallway, Ruby would rush with me right beside her. But an isolated farm is a kingdom of one man, my dears. And the king of that kingdom was the odd-eye colonel. There was nowhere to run, no one to ask for help. The city was too far away, and no one questioned a colonel. I had just turned 11 when I realized my childhood had truly ended. 11 years old. A number too small to carry the burden of adulthood, and even more terrifying, the burden of a prisoner. If you are listening, my dear girl, know that no child deserves to grow up in fear and darkness. Never. I realized it when my father locked the farm gate and hid the key. I realized it when he sent Ruby and Dylan away, saying he no longer needed servants. That was his way of isolating me. His little girl. He didn't need to save money. He needed the absence of witnessing eyes and protective hands. When good people leave, the monster in the house is free to act. My darlings, always seek out good people around you. I realized it when he looked at me on that foggy afternoon and said with that hoarse voice, "Now you will take care of me, Michelle. You are mine now." After Ruby and Dylan left the farm, carrying their bundles of clothes and looking back with the expression of those who knew they were abandoning me in a bad place, the house's smell changed, my dears. It no longer smelled of food on the wood stove, no longer smelled of laundry soap from washed clothes. It smelled of mildew, of cold ashes in the fireplace, of heavy loneliness that clung to the walls. I was 11 years old and suddenly, terrifyingly, the only woman left in that house. My father decreed I had to learn all the chores, that I had to take care of him now, repeating like a verdict, "It is your duty as a daughter. It is your mother's legacy." But the words were a lie. It was slavery, sealed by a terrifying claim of ownership. Early in the morning, I would start the fire, make the coffee, warm the bread, wash the dishes, sweep the hardwood floor, and dust the furniture. In the afternoon, I cooked lunch, washed his clothes in the basin, and hung them on the line. At night, I made dinner, waited for him to eat in silence, and then cleared everything again. But the household chores weren't the worst part, my darling. The worst was his studying silence. The worst were those eyes, one green, one brown, following me through every room. The worst was feeling that I was no longer his daughter. I was something else, something he believed he owned. The worst was the shame. It was a silence worse than any scream, a silence that convinced me I was the cause of all that filth. I learned to look in the mirror and see a stain, not a girl. This shame was my father's second chain, lighter than iron but infinitely harder to break. It wasn't just my body he owned my very worth. I walked the hallway like a sinner in a church, hoping my shadow would not offend the light. I lived in a constant, low-frequency terror, where the only thing worse than the present was the certainty of the next night. The first bad night happened 3 weeks after the servants left. It was a night of a full moon, so bright that it shone through the crack in my bedroom window and drew a square of light on the wood floor. I was almost asleep when I heard my bedroom door creak open slowly. I opened my eyes and saw his silhouette in the doorway, standing, watching me. My heart pounded. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and lay still, pretending to be asleep. He came in, closed the door behind him, and that night, my dears, I understood that my life would never be the same. That creaking door marked the moment Michelle's childhood was tragically and violently stolen. It's a pain that words can barely capture, but the sheer bravery it took to survive is unimaginable. The story only gets harder from here, but the coming redemption is powerful, so don't click away. I understood that there was nowhere to run, no one to call, no way to scream, because there, on that farm lost in the foothills, Colonel Frank was God and judge, and I was an 1-year-old girl locked in his kingdom. I won't describe what happened that night, not that one, nor the others that followed. Not because I don't remember, I remember every second, every sound, every pain. But because there are things that one's mouth cannot speak. Do you understand? There are things that stay trapped inside, burning, but that you cannot put into words without breaking apart entirely. What I can say is that after that first night, he came back, and he came back again and again, and it became routine. It became part of my life as a prisoner. I prayed every day to the Virgin Mary, asking her to get me out of there, asking her to make it stop. But the days passed, and nothing changed. Only I kept withering inside, turning into a shadow. I grew up too fast, my dears. By 12 years old, I was no longer a child. My body changed, my demeanor changed. I learned to walk through the house in silence, to make no noise, to attract no attention. I learned to cook the meals he liked, to try and keep him in a good mood. I learned to wash and iron his clothes exactly right. I learned that if I obeyed in everything, maybe he would be faster, colder, less present. Some days, I would stand by the kitchen window, looking at the dirt road that led down to the city, and I dreamed of running away. I imagined myself running down that road barefoot, the cold foothill wind on my face, running until I reached Charlottesville and begged someone, anyone, for help. But I knew it wouldn't work. He would find me. And when he found me, I didn't even want to imagine what he would do. I tried once. It was on a summer day in 1956. I had just turned 13. My father had gone to the city to get supplies and would be gone for a few hours. As soon as his pickup truck disappeared around the bend in the road, I ran to my room, put on the least worn dress I had, put on my old boots, and left through the kitchen door. I ran down the road, kicking up dust. My legs were trembling. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my mouth. I looked back every minute, afraid of seeing the pickup truck return. I managed to get halfway, near that curve where there is a shrine of the Virgin Mary. I was breathless, my legs aching, but happy. I thought I would make it. That's when I heard the engine. I looked back and saw the dust rising. He had come back early. He had forgotten something or had become suspicious. I don't know. I only know that the pickup truck stopped next to me. The door opened, and he got out with a look I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was a coldness, a contempt, a certainty that I was his property and that I had tried to run away. He grabbed my arm, threw me into the pickup truck, and drove back to the farm in silence. When we arrived, he locked me in the back room, the one we used to store tools. I stayed there for 3 days, my dears. 3 days in the dark with a can of water and a piece of stale bread. I learned the lesson he wanted to teach me. There was no way out, no escape. I was his. After that day, the cold, physical terror was replaced by a deep, constant despair. The farm became a physical manifestation of my hopelessness, where the huge, silent oak trees seemed like witnesses who refused to speak. I no longer had the strength to look at the dirt road. Instead, I fixed my gaze on the smallest details in the house, the dust motes dancing in the single ray of light that hit the parlor floor, the faded pattern on the wallpaper, the chips in the wooden table, anything to keep my mind from the truth of my existence. I buried the girl I was and put on the blank face of a servant, hoping the mask would make the days bearable. After that, I stopped trying. I stopped dreaming of the road. I accepted that that farm was my prison and that the odd-eye colonel was my jailer and my tormentor. There are times in life when the desperation is so great that we let go. I accepted the death of hope. But my dears, I later learned, acceptance is not surrender, but taking a break to regain strength. Do not let the walls imprison your soul. The years passed 13, 14, 15 years. I lived like a ghost inside that house. I cooked, cleaned, washed, and at night, when I heard my bedroom door creak, I just closed my eyes and prayed for it to end quickly. There were times when he traveled to do business in other cities. He would be gone for a week, sometimes 2. These were my only moments of peace, my dears. I would breathe deeply, walk around the house without fear, sleep all night without waking up startled, but he always came back. And when he returned, it was worse, as if he had saved all the rage and desire of those days to unleash on me all at once. It was during one of these absences of his, when I was 17 years old, that I noticed something was different about my body. I was nauseous in the mornings. My breasts were sore. My stomach, which had always been flat, was starting to swell a little. I spent a week denying it, thinking it was an illness, something I had eaten. But when my period didn't come for the 2nd month in a row, I broke down in tears right there in the middle of the kitchen, holding my stomach, because I knew what it meant. I was pregnant by my own father, and there was nowhere to go, no way to hide, no way to change it. When he returned from his trip, he would find out, and I had no idea what would happen to me. My father returned from his trip on an autumn afternoon. I heard the noise of the pickup truck climbing the dirt road, and my whole body turned to ice. I was in the kitchen peeling sweet potatoes for lunch, and when I looked down at my cotton dress, you could see it. The belly had grown, not much, but it was visible. 3 months pregnant. I tried to pull my apron forward, tried to hide it, but it was useless. He walked through the kitchen door, carrying a sack of supplies, threw the sack on the table, took off his hat, and looked at me. Those eyes, one green, one brown, scanned my body from head to toe, slowly, until they stopped at my stomach. I saw the exact moment he understood. His face turned white, then red, then purple with rage. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at my belly with a trembling finger. I lowered my head, unable to speak. The tears were already falling. "Answer," he yelled, and punched the table, making the sweet potato knife jump. I'm expecting a baby, Father," I managed to whisper. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. He stared at me, breathing heavily, and I saw the fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of me. It wasn't remorse for what he had done. It was fear of being discovered. It was fear of losing his reputation, the respect that Colonel Frank Wallace had in Charlottesville. If anyone found out that his daughter was pregnant, living alone with him on the farm, everyone would know the truth. Everyone would know what he was. "No one can know about this," he said softly, but with a harshness in his voice that cut deep. "Do you hear me? No one will know. But Father, the baby will be born. I can't hide it. You will hide it. Yes," he roared, grabbing my arm and pulling me close. This thing growing inside you will not be born. It won't. I will find a way." The next day, he returned from the city with a leather bag. When he opened it in front of me, my stomach churned. Inside were 3 wide girdles, made of thick leather and reinforced with steel rods corsets, but not the delicate ones that city girls use to thin their waists. These were instruments of torture, my dears. They were heavy, rigid, with metal buckles and thick ropes for tightening. "You will wear this every day," he said, throwing one of the girdles into my lap. "Morning, noon, and night. You will tighten it until you can't bear it anymore. And then you will tighten it a little more. Father, for God's sake, this will hurt it is meant to hurt." He cut me off. "It is for the thing inside you to vanish before it's born. It is to disappear. And if you don't tighten it properly, I will tighten it for you." And he did tighten it, my dears. That first morning, he made me take off my dress, put the leather and steel girdle around my belly, and began pulling the straps. I felt the leather bite into my skin, felt the steel rods press against my belly, felt my baby being crushed inside. This was pure, premeditated cruelty. The colonel didn't just want the evidence gone. He wanted to eradicate the life force itself. Yet, in that steel-enforced darkness, a miracle was actively fighting to exist. Tune in now to witness the child's incredible 9-month resistance. I screamed in pain, tried to push his hands away, but he was too strong. "Tighten it more," he said, pulling the straps forcefully. "Tighten it more. The thing inside will vanish. It will disappear before it's born." When he finished, I could barely breathe. Every time I tried to inhale, the girdle tightened more. The steel rods dug deeper. I fell to my knees, clutching my belly, crying, asking for forgiveness from my son, who was being crushed inside me, and it became routine. Every morning, he would come into my room with the girdle. Every day he would tighten it, pull the straps to the last hole, and tie the ropes hard. I pleaded. I cried. I said it would hurt the baby, that it would kill my son, but he didn't listen, or pretended not to. "You will wear this until it's gone," he repeated every day like a mantra. Until it's gone. The days passed, and the pain worsened. My skin became bruised, with deep grooves where the leather and steel pressed. My belly hurt so much that I couldn't sleep. I would lie on my side, hand on my stomach, feeling my baby move against the iron, trying to find space, fighting to survive. "Forgive me, my son," I whispered in the darkness of the room. "Forgive me. Your mother can't protect you. Your mother can't get you out of here." I prayed every day for my baby to survive. I prayed to the Virgin Mary, to St. Jude, to all the saints I knew. "Protect him, Lord," I pleaded. "Don't let him die because of his grandfather's wickedness. Let him live, please." By 5 months pregnant, I was so weak I could barely walk. The girdles had left my belly all bruised, all marked. I would sometimes have small bleedings that terrified me. But the baby kept moving, kept fighting. My son was strong, my dears, stronger than the iron, stronger than the wickedness. There was one night I woke up with a terrible pain, a different kind of pain. I thought I would lose my baby. I dragged myself to my father's bedroom door and knocked, crying, begging him to call a doctor. He opened the door, looked at me lying on the floor, writhing in pain. And you know what he said? "If it dies, all the better. Problem solved." And he slammed the door in my face. I crawled back to my room, lay down on the bed, and cried until I had no more tears. But the pain passed, and my baby was still there, moving, resisting. That night I understood something. My son wanted to live. He was fighting to live. And if he was fighting, I had to fight too. It was a moment of the most terrible solitude, but also a moment of my first self-control. Cutting the cord wasn't just cutting the bloodline. It was severing the link to the past. Always remember, my dears, even when you have nothing, you still have the ability to save yourself. And always keep a ruby in your mind. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. With each passing month, my father became more nervous, more aggressive. He didn't understand how the pregnancy was still there, how my baby was still alive after so long being crushed. He bought an even tighter girdle, with more steel rods, with thicker straps, but it didn't help. My son kept growing, kept living. What kind of devil child is this that won't die? My father screamed one day after tightening the new girdle so hard that I passed out from the pain. When I woke up, he was sitting on the edge of my bed, head in his hands, talking to himself. "This is not natural. This is not natural." And it wasn't natural, my dears, because my son was a A miracle who survived 9 months of torture, 9 months of iron and leather trying to erase him from existence. My baby was stronger than all the hatred of that man. When it was 2 weeks shy of 9 months, my father stopped tightening the girdle. Not because he felt pity, but because he realized it wouldn't work. He had failed. The creature he had tried to kill was still alive and would soon be born. The first contraction came on a stormy night. It was January of 1961, a terrible winter in Charlottesville. Just as I recalled in the very beginning of my story, the month when the cold truly set in. The kind where you see your breath turn to smoke in the air and the frost burns the plants in the yard. The wind howled through the foothills, shaking the old windows of the house and making the floorboards groan, as if the house itself were afraid of what was going to happen that night. I was lying in my room, wrapped in the thin blanket that barely kept me warm, with my hands on my huge belly, feeling my son stir restlessly inside. He had been agitated all day, kicking, turning, as if he knew the hour was near. I spoke softly to him, running my hand over where I felt his little feet push against my stretched skin. "Soon we will truly meet, my son," I whispered. "Soon you will be out here in my arms." That's when the pain came. It started in my back, a strong pressure that rose, enveloping my entire belly, squeezing as if invisible hands were twisting my body. I doubled over, clutching the thin mattress, biting my lip until I tasted blood. I tried to breathe as I had seen Ruby do when she gave birth to Dylan, that short, quick breath, but it didn't help. The pain consumed everything. When it passed, I lay there trembling, sweating despite the cold, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would fly out of my chest. Not yet, I thought, trying to convince myself. It's not time yet. But my body knew better than my head. 20 minutes later, another contraction came, stronger, longer, pulling a moan from me even though I tried to stay quiet. And then another and another, each one closer. I knew what was happening. My son was coming, and he wouldn't wait any longer. I got out of bed as best I could, holding onto the wall to keep from falling, dragging my heavy, aching body to the door. Every step was agony. Every movement made the marks from the girdles on my belly burn as if they were on fire. My legs were shaking so much that I thought I would collapse right there in the dark hallway. I had to call my father. As much as I hated that man with every fiber of my being, as much as I was terrified of him, I knew I would need help. No woman gives birth alone and survives. No woman can cut the cord, clean the baby, stop the bleeding by herself. Even knowing who he was, even knowing what he had done to me, in that moment, I had no choice. I knocked on his bedroom door with a trembling hand. "Father," I called, my voice weak at first. I knocked again, harder. "Father, the baby is coming. Help me, please." I heard him move on the other side, the creak of the old spring bed, the grunts of someone woken up in the middle of the night. The door opened slowly, and he appeared in a white nightshirt, his gray hair messy, with those eyes, one green, one brown, still puffy with sleep. But when he saw my state, the nightgown soaked with sweat clinging to my body, the huge belly protruding, my face contorted in pain, his eyes widened, not with concern for his daughter, not with compassion. It was pure panic. Panic that the thing he had tried to destroy for months was finally coming into the world. "Already?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost accusatory, as if it were my fault I was in labor. "That thing is being born already?" I could only nod my head before another contraction hit me. This time it was so strong that my legs gave out. I fell to my knees right there in the hallway, clutching my belly, and the scream escaped without me being able to hold it back. A scream of pain, of despair, of fear. He grabbed my arm forcefully, lifted me without gentleness, and dragged me back to my room. He threw me on the bed like a sack of potatoes. "Stay there, and don't make a scene," he ordered, his voice cold like the wind outside. "I don't want to hear shrieking all night." And he left. I heard his heavy footsteps going down to the kitchen, then to the basement. I heard him rummaging through things, dragging metal objects, mumbling to himself. I was left there alone in the dark, hugging myself, feeling the contractions come one after the other, each one stronger, each one closer. When he returned, he was carrying a rusty iron bucket, the kind we used to feed the pigs, and some old, dirty rags, the kind we used to clean the floor or dry the tools. He placed the bucket on the floor, right beside the bed, where I could see it, and tossed the rags onto the mattress. And that was it. He didn't ask if I was in pain, didn't offer water, didn't say he would fetch a doctor in the city or Mrs. Jones, the midwife who lived near the church. Nothing. He just pulled the old chair from the corner and sat there leaning against the wall, crossing his arms, watching me with that empty expression. I understood immediately what that bucket meant. He was waiting for all that monstrous effort of months spent tightening iron girdles to have paid off, waiting for something stillborn, deformed, that he could throw into that bucket and take to the woods or the river, waiting to get rid of the evidence that could destroy his name, the reputation of the powerful odd-eye colonel. To be in such pain, giving birth alone, while the father of the child waited with a rusted bucket, is the definition of betrayal. Michelle faced her final test of survival with no one but herself. But keep listening, it's at this darkest hour that the light of justice finally begins to shine. The hours dragged on, and the pain became unbearable. I completely lost track of time. It could have been midnight. It could have been 3 or 4 inches the morning. All I knew was that my body was being ripped apart from the inside out, that every contraction was worse than the last, that I was losing blood, that I wanted to die right there just to stop feeling it. Outside, the storm had turned into a monster. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the room for seconds and showing the silhouette of my father sitting in that chair, motionless as a stone statue, merely watching me. The thunder was so loud, so close, that it made the window panes vibrate and the whole house shake on its foundations. It seemed like God was angry, my dears. It seemed like the whole sky was crying over the wickedness that had happened in that house. I screamed, cried, pleaded, "Help me, Father, help me, please, do something, I'm dying." But he didn't answer, didn't move, just stayed there watching me suffer with a coldness that was worse than any hatred. There was a moment, somewhere in the night, when I felt I couldn't go on. I felt my body giving up, my strength draining, life slipping out of me, along with the blood. My vision began to darken at the edges. My breathing became faint, broken. I heard a ringing in my ears, as if I were sinking underwater. I can't take it anymore, I thought, letting my head fall onto the pillow, wet with sweat and tears. I can't. Better to die. Better to end this once and for all. Forgive me, my son. Your mother is not strong enough. Your mother will fail you. But it was exactly at that moment, when I was at my limit, when I was certain I would die in that bed, that I felt something, a presence, a gentle warmth that entered the cold room, a scent of lavender and homemade bread that I had known since I was a child. For a second, just 1 second, but as real as my own body, I saw my mother. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, right beside me, wearing that blue dress she wore on Sundays, her hair pulled back in a bun, with that sweet, peaceful smile that only she had. She stroked my sweaty forehead, a touch so gentle, so loving, that it made me cry even harder. "Be strong, my Michelle," I heard her voice, clear as crystal. "Your son needs you. He has been fighting inside there for 9 months. You need to fight too. Just a little longer. Just a little longer, my daughter." And I fought, my dears. God and my mother know how I fought. I grabbed the sheets with such force that I ripped the old fabric. I bit the pillow until my teeth ached. And I pushed. I pushed with the last bit of strength that existed in me. With every piece of life that still remained in my ravaged body, I pushed until I felt something coming out, until I felt my baby's body sliding, warm and slippery, until I felt him come out completely. And then, silence. A terrible, heavy silence that filled the room like a shroud. The baby had been born, but he hadn't cried. I lifted my head, desperate. My heart stopped beating. "My son," I whispered. "My son, please." My father stood up from the chair for the first time in hours, approached slowly, looked at the baby lying there between my legs, still connected to me by the pulsing cord. He bent down, picked up my son by the tiny feet with those large, calloused hands, lifted him upside down, and shook him. Nothing. No sound, no movement. Dead. I heard him murmur, and for the first time that whole night, there was something in his voice. Relief. Thank God he died. Finally dead. My world collapsed. I had carried that baby for months against all odds. I had felt him move, fight, resist the iron girdles. I had prayed thousands of prayers for him to survive. And now? Now he was dead. Dead because of that man's wickedness. "Give him to me," I begged, holding out my trembling arms, tears falling non-stop. "Give me my son. Let me hold him just once. Let me say goodbye, please." But my father didn't hear me, or pretended not to. He turned his back, still holding my baby by the feet, walking toward that rusty bucket. He was going to throw him in there, going to get rid of the body as if it were trash, as if that baby had never existed. I opened my mouth to scream, to plead, to curse, but no sound came out. My voice had died along with my son. That's when it happened. The baby let out a cry, a loud, strong, furious, indignant cry. A cry that filled the entire room, that drowned out even the noise of the storm outside. A cry of someone who had survived hell and was announcing to the whole world that he was alive. My father stopped in the middle of the room, frozen, still holding my son upside down. The storm outside stopped too, suddenly, as if even nature had held its breath to see what would happen. A supernatural silence fell over the farm, and then lightning struck so close that it illuminated the entire room as if it were broad daylight, so strong that it made the whole house tremble. And it was in that raw, white light that my father finally turned the baby over, looked at his little face, red from crying so much, and let out a scream that I will never forget as long as I live. A scream of absolute panic, of primitive terror, of deep psychological horror. A scream of a man who had seen something his mind could not process, something impossible, something supernatural. He dropped my son into my lap as if he had picked up a live coal, stumbled backward, hit his back against the wall so hard that a picture of a saint fell to the floor and shattered. And he stayed there, sliding down the wall, staring fixedly at the baby in my lap, his mouth open, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets, his face white as chalk, sweating cold even with the winter outside. He wasn't looking at James, he was looking at a ghost. That very heterochromia, which was his family's genetic sign, became the living proof of the crime he had hidden for 20 years. My dears, justice sometimes doesn't need swords. It only needs the existence of the truth itself. "No," he whispered, his voice broken, unrecognizable. "It can't be. It's not possible. She's back." I looked at my son, trying to understand what had made that man so terrified. I picked him up in my arms carefully, wiped his face with the corner of the sheet, and that's when I saw it. My son was there in my lap, crying hard, his tiny lungs working perfectly after 9 months of being crushed against the iron. The sound of that cry was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life. It was life. It was resistance. It was victory over the death that had tried to take him even before he was born. I held him with my 2 trembling hands, still weak from the blood loss, and brought him closer to my face. I needed to see my son clearly. I needed to know his little face, to memorize every detail, every mark, because for months I had talked to him, prayed for him, but I had never truly seen him. I took the corner of the sheet, the one stained with my blood and his blood, and cleaned his delicate little face with care. I wiped his tiny forehead, his newborn flat nose, his cheeks still reddish from the effort of birth. And when I cleaned his little eyes, when he opened his swollen eyelids and looked at me for the first time, my heart stopped. My baby's eyes, one eye was dark brown, and the other was light green. A perfect, undeniable, asterisk, asterisk, heterochromia, asterisk, asterisk, exactly like my father's eyes. It was the genetic mark of the Wallace family, the undeniable proof of who this baby's father was. The sheer existence of little James was a miracle, but those eyes, they were a signature, a screaming piece of evidence that the colonel could never deny. His panic was instant and absolute. This moment is the true climax, the point where an infant's eyes delivered long-awaited justice. Don't go anywhere. The final confession is next. It was the same mark as the generous grandmother, the one I had never truly known. My son had been born with the genetic mark that only one person in thousands carries, and that mark was the signature of the Wallace family. It was the living, indisputable, screaming proof of who that baby's father was. Anyone in Charlottesville who saw those eyes would know immediately. The odd-eye colonel had a son, and that son was born of his own daughter. But that was not what made my father scream that way. It wasn't just the panic of being discovered, of losing his reputation, of becoming the region's shame. It was something else. Something much deeper. something that stirred the guilt buried for decades in the rotten bottom of his soul. I looked at the corner of the room, where my father was huddled against the wall. The big, strong man who had always commanded everything and everyone was now reduced to a trembling creature, sweating cold, his eyes wide with pure terror. He stared fixedly at my son, as if he were seeing something beyond the baby, as if he were seeing ghosts, as if he were seeing the past materialized in flesh. His lips moved non-stop, whispering words that I could barely hear over the baby's crying. I leaned my ear closer, trying to understand as I rocked my son against my bare chest, feeling his little warmth against my cold skin. "Forgive me, Mother," he whispered, his voice broken, childlike, and unrecognizable. It was no longer the harsh voice of the colonel. It was the voice of a frightened boy. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to. Don't you understand? Don't you, Mother? I needed the land. I needed the farm. The creditors would take everything. I had no choice. Forgive me, Mother. Don't come back, please. Don't come back. Don't take me. Don't take me to hell, I beg you." It was there, in that room, still illuminated by the last rays of the storm that was moving away on that gray January dawn, that I understood everything. The generous grandmother had not died of natural causes. It hadn't been an illness. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been the will of God. It had been my father. She was a good woman, a pious woman. But she stood in the way of his greed. He had killed his own mother. The maid's whispered conversation suddenly made sense. The sudden death, the quick burial, without a proper wake, the change in my father's behavior after that, when he took total control of the farm, the absence of other relatives questioning the inheritance. Everything had been planned. Everything had been coldly executed. I don't know if he used poison, if he pushed her from somewhere, if he suffocated her in her sleep, but he had done it. He had taken the life of the woman who bore him to keep the inheritance of Oakwood Plantation, the land, the cattle, the power. And for more than 20 years, he lived with this secret, with this rot in his soul, hidden behind the reputation of a respected colonel, a good man, a pillar of the Charlottesville community until that night, until the moment he looked into the eyes of the baby. He tried to murder for months and saw his mother looking back at him through the generations. He saw divine justice taking form. He saw the ghost he thought he had buried returning to collect the debt. "She's back," my father repeated, now louder, his voice gaining a tone of rising hysteria. "She's come back to get me. She's come back to punish me." The eyes, dear God, the same eyes. Her eyes, how can it be? How can she be here? God forbid, God forbid. Holy Mary, Mother of God. He began to pray, but the prayers came out all wrong, mixed with crying and delirious confessions. "Hail Mary, full of grace, I did kill her, but it was an accident. The Lord is with thee." It wasn't on purpose. It was on purpose, yes. "Blessed art thou among women. Forgive me, Mother, forgive me." He stood up, stumbling, his legs trembling so much that he almost fell. He still stared fixedly at the baby in my lap, but now with a hatred mixed with fear, as if my son were both his victim and his tormentor, as if that innocent baby carried within him all the guilt and all the punishment he deserved. "You are not a baby," he said, pointing at my son with a trembling finger. "You are her. You are my mother. You came back in this creature's body to torment me, but I won't let you. I won't." He started walking backward, tripping over his own feet, bumping into things. The small room seemed to have gotten even smaller, the walls closing in on him. He knocked over the chair where he had sat all night watching me suffer. He stumbled over the rusty bucket he had brought to throw my son's body into, and the bucket rolled across the wood floor, making a terrible metallic noise that echoed through the empty house. "It wasn't me," he screamed suddenly, so loud that it made the baby cry harder. "I didn't kill you, Mother. You're lying. You're trying to blame me for something I didn't do." But then, as if his own voice had betrayed him, the truth came out unfiltered. "You fell. You fell down the stairs. I just pushed you a little bit. Just a little. You were old. You were sick anyway. You were going to die regardless. I just hurried it along for the farm, for the family, for the Wallaces. It was for the family." Terror forced decades of hidden sin out of the colonel's mouth, exposing not one, but two brutal crimes. This was the moment the mighty man of the county broke, reduced to a ghost-haunted, trembling wreck. With the villain in flight, the story now shifts to Michelle's hard-won freedom and her journey to healing. Listen on to discover how she began her new life. The complete confession was there, pouring out of his mouth in hysterical screams. He had pushed his own mother down the old house's stairs, watched her fall, break her neck, die, and told everyone it had been an accident, that she had tripped, that it was old age, poor eyesight, weak bones, and everyone had believed him. Why? Who would doubt Colonel Frank Wallace? Who would dare question a man so powerful, so respected? But you are here now. He continued, speaking directly to the baby, completely out of touch with reality. You came back to get me, didn't you? To drag me down there, to the eternal fire. But I won't. I won't go with you. I prefer to run away. I prefer to disappear. And that is exactly what he did. In a sudden movement, he turned and ran out of the room. I heard his heavy footsteps in the wood hallway, stumbling, knocking things over. I heard him hit the doorframe of the living room, curse, and keep running. I heard the front door open violently, slamming against the wall so hard that the glass in the nearby window shattered. I got out of bed as best I could, still holding my son, still bleeding, and went to the bedroom window. I saw my father run across the yard, barefoot, in a white nightshirt, soaked by the rain, his arms swinging wildly. The storm had returned outside, a fine but constant rain that was already drenching him. "Forgive me, Mother," I heard him scream in the middle of the night, his voice breaking. "Forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't know you would come back." He ran toward the gate, passed through it, and ran down the dirt road that led to the city. Even from a distance, even in the darkness, I could see his white figure moving away, stumbling, falling, getting up again, continuing his escape. And I could hear the screams getting fainter and fainter until they were just echoes in the cold night. And then, silence. The odd-eye colonel had fled. He had abandoned his own farm, his own home, his whole life, everything he had built upon a murder. He had fled from the baby he thought was his mother's curse, coming back for revenge. He had fled from the guilt that had finally taken physical form and looked back at him with those impossible eyes. I stood by the window for a long time, just holding my son, listening to his breathing calm, feeling his warm little body against mine. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the earth, washing the world, washing away all the sins of that cursed farm. For the first time in 7 years, since my mother had died and that man had become my tormentor, I was alone, no longer defined by his evil. I was still covered in blood and pain, but I was free from his watch, free from his lie, and finally, truly, mine. No longer a possession, but a mother. I no longer had to fear the bedroom door opening in the middle of the night. Free, I returned to the bed, trembling, my legs weak, but with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness yet. It was relief. It was as if an immense weight had been lifted off me, as if I could finally take a deep breath after years of holding my breath. The umbilical cord still connected us, my son and me. I looked at that thick cord of life that was still pulsing, pumping the last remnants of life-giving blood, the same bloodline that carried both the curse and the cure. I needed to cut it. I needed to separate him from me. But how? There was no doctor, no midwife, no one to teach me. I looked around the room, searching for something. I saw the old knife with the wood handle that my father had left on the bedside table. That knife that he would probably have used to cut the cord of the dead baby before throwing the body into the river. I picked up the knife with a trembling hand. I didn't know exactly where to cut, but I knew I had to do it. I prayed softly, "God, help me not to err, protect my son." And I cut. I cut the cord right in the middle between him and me. It bled a little. I took a piece of thick thread from the drawer, the kind we used to sew flour sacks, and tied his navel tightly, as I had seen Ruby do with Dylan years ago. I tied it tightly so it wouldn't bleed. My son didn't even cry. He just looked at me with those eyes, one brown, one green, as if he knew his mother was doing the best she could. I looked at the knife in my hand, then at the blood-soaked cord, and understood the terrible solitude of that birth. But then I looked at my son's face, and in the sheer miracle of his life, a strange certainty washed over me. I had survived the worst, and I would not be alone forever. I would find Ruby, Her love was the one tether I had to the goodness that still existed beyond the Oakwood gate. I cleaned him with the old rags, even though they were dirty, because it was all I had. I removed all the blood, all the white residue that covered his little body. He was small, smaller than I thought a baby should be. 9 months of being crushed had left him tiny, but he was perfect. 10 little fingers on his hands, 10 little toes on his feet, tiny nose, tiny mouth, tiny ears, everything in the right place. I wrapped him in an old blanket and lay him beside me. I took care of myself as best I could, tying rags between my legs to staunch the blood that was still flowing. Everything hurt. It hurt, but it was a different pain. It was the pain of someone who survived. It was the pain of someone who won. "You are a miracle," I whispered to my son, kissing his warm little forehead. "You survived 9 months of iron trying to crush you. You survived a father who wanted to kill you. And when you were born, when you opened those eyes that God gave you, you expelled the devil from our life without having to do anything, just by existing, just by being who you are." I lay on my side, pulled him closer, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear. I slept knowing that when I woke up, that man would not be there waiting for me. I slept with my son in my arms, free. I woke up several times during that first night. Each time I woke up, I would run my hand over my baby's chest to feel him breathing, to make sure it wasn't a dream. And he was there, alive, warm, sleeping peacefully. The next 3 days were the strangest of my life. I would get up occasionally to look for food in the pantry. There was stale bread that I would soak in water to eat. There was a piece of hard cheese. There were some potatoes. I ate everything slowly, trying to regain my strength. I drank water directly from the water jug. I would return to bed and nurse my son, who nursed well, strong, determined. On the second day, I managed to walk to the kitchen and make some peppermint tea. I drank it hot, holding the cup with my 2 trembling hands. Through the window, I saw that my father's pickup truck was still there, parked under the shed, but no sign of him. On the third day, I was in the living room, sitting in the old rocking chair, rocking my son, when I heard a motor noise climbing the road. My heart pounded. Panic returned all at once. "He's back," I thought. "He's back, and he's going to finish what he started." I picked up my baby, ran to the room, locked myself in, and braced the wardrobe against the door. I stood there trembling, waiting to hear his footsteps, his voice, his fury. But the voice that called from outside wasn't his. It was a voice made of warm bread and forgotten kindness. "Michelle, Michelle, is that you, my daughter? It's Ruby." Just when Michelle needed it most, kindness returned in the form of her dearest friend, Ruby. Her arrival was more than help. It was the world reaching back out to the girl who had been abandoned for so long. Michelle's road to recovery begins here, and we promise you, the beautiful ending is worth the wait. Stay tuned for the final chapters of her incredible story, Ruby. Hearing her name, hearing her voice, a sound I thought I'd forgotten, was the moment the 7-year-old dam of terror and exhaustion finally broke. I opened it, ran through the house, and when I opened the front door and saw her standing on the porch with that worried face, I collapsed. I collapsed into her arms and cried. I cried everything I had held in for 3 days. I cried from relief, from exhaustion, from pain, from freedom. And she held me, hugged me tight, and cried with me. "Oh, my girl," she said, rocking me as if I were a child. "Oh, my dear Michelle, what did they do to you?" She came into the house, helped me sit down, took my baby in her lap, and looked at him. When she saw his eyes, one brown, one green, she understood everything. I didn't need to speak. She knew. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, blessing the baby. "Jesus Christ, have mercy." It was she who told me what had happened to my father. In the early hours of that stormy night, around 4 inches the morning, some people who lived near the main town square of Charlottesville had heard screams. When they looked outside, they saw a barefoot man in a white nightshirt, drenched in rain, walking in circles in the square, screaming alone. It was the odd-eye colonel, but he no longer looked like the colonel. He looked like a madman, completely insane. He was screaming nonsense about ghosts, about his mother, about eyes that had returned to claim him, about having pushed someone down the stairs. The men in the city tried to calm him down, but he kept struggling, saying he wasn't going to hell, that he wasn't going to let the ghost take him. They called the doctor. The doctor said it was a severe psychotic break, complete, irreversible madness. The next day, they took him to the state mental hospital in Richmond, Virginia, and there he stayed. She said he never stopped screaming. Ruby told me in a low voice, day and night, non-stop, she's back, she's back, she's here, she's watching me. He doesn't recognize anyone anymore. He doesn't eat properly, doesn't sleep, just screams. My father had gone completely mad. The guilt he carried for more than 20 years had finally exploded. Seeing those eyes in the baby, the same eyes as the mother he murdered, had broken his mind in a way that couldn't be fixed. And you, my daughter? Ruby asked, running her hand over my face. How are you? Who took care of you? Who helped with the birth? No one, I said, my voice failing. I was alone. He was going to throw the baby in the bucket. He thought he would be born dead. But when he was born alive, when he saw his eyes, he ran away screaming. Ruby shook her head, her eyes full of tears. God punished him, she said. God punished him for his wickedness, and he had indeed been punished in the worst possible way, not with death, but with madness, with the eternal torment of seeing his mother's ghost in every shadow, in every reflection, until the end of his days. Ruby stayed with me, took care of me until I recovered, taught me how to care for the baby properly, helped me clean the house, cook, and get back to living. A week after the birth, when I could walk without so much pain, she asked me, "What are you going to name him?" I looked at my son nursing at my breast, that miracle with two colored eyes, the one who had survived 9 months of attempted murder, the one whose simple existence had been more powerful than all the wickedness in the world. James, I said. His name is James. It means the strong one, because there is no stronger child than him. He conquered the iron, he conquered death, and he conquered the devil. And he truly had conquered, my dears. My son James had been born with the mark of justice on his face. Those eyes, one brown, one green, carried the genetic memory of an ancient crime. He didn't need to fight, didn't need to take revenge, didn't need to do anything. His simple existence was enough to expel that wicked man from my life forever. Today I am 82 years old, my dears, and I live here in Charlottesville, in the Riverbend neighborhood, in this simple little house that is my corner of peace. A lot has happened since that night in June of 1961 until today. A lot of water has passed under the bridge, but I survived. My son survived, and we built a good life, an honest life, full of love. Soon after Ruby arrived and helped me recover from childbirth, I made the most important decision of my life, to sell the Oakwood plantation. I couldn't stay in that place anymore, my dears. Every room in that house held a bad memory. Every floorboard creaked with the weight of suffering. That land was stained with blood and sin. In 1962, I sold the farm to the neighbor, Mr. Harold, who had always wanted to expand his land. I took the money from the sale, it wasn't much, but it was enough, and moved to the city of Charlottesville with my son James and with Ruby, who never abandoned me again. I bought a small house here in Riverbend, near the church, on a flat piece of land where there was no memory of pain. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a little backyard in the back. It was all I needed. It was freedom. It was a new beginning. My father died in 1965, still hospitalized in that Richmond hospital. He never regained his sanity. He spent 4 years screaming day and night, seeing ghosts, reliving the guilt. When they notified me of his death, I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger, either. I only felt a deep relief, as if the last thread that tied me to that time had finally broken. I raised my James with all the love I had kept in my heart. Ruby helped me with everything. She was like a true grandmother to the boy. She taught him to walk, to speak his first words. She spent hours playing with him in the backyard. When he started growing up and the other children asked about his different eyes, one brown, one green, I would say, "That's how God made him, and God doesn't make mistakes." Some people found it strange at first. Some remembered the odd eye kernel and did the math. But I never hid anything. I held my head up and kept going. My son was not guilty of anything. He was pure, he was innocent, he was a miracle. James grew up strong, healthy, and hardworking. He went to the public school here in Charlottesville until he finished junior high. Then he started working as an apprentice in a cabinetry shop, learning the trade of making furniture. He had a knack for it. His hands were skilled, careful. When he turned 25, he met Charlotte, a good girl, the daughter of a local merchant. They fell in love, dated properly, and got married in the church. I cried so much at that wedding, my dears. I cried with happiness to see my son happy, free, building his own family, without carrying the burden I carried. James and Charlotte gave me 3 children, Alexander, Penelope, and the youngest, Liam. And Penelope, my daughter, gave me Layla, my 6-year-old granddaughter, who is the light of my eyes. When that little girl comes over on the weekends and climbs into my lap, asking me to make crochet flowers for her, I thank God for letting me live to see this. Ruby passed away in 2010, at 89 years old, sleeping peacefully in her own bed. We buried her here in the Charlottesville cemetery with all honors. She was the one who taught me what true mother's love was. She was the one who showed me that family is not just blood. It's who stays, who cares, who loves without asking for anything in return. After she was gone, I was alone in this little house, but only alone in living here, because my son comes to see me every day, truly every day, without fail. He stops by in the morning before going to the cabinetry shop, has a coffee with me, asks if everything is okay, if I need anything. On Sundays, the whole family comes for lunch here. Charlotte brings the food already cooked because she doesn't want to see me working too hard, but I insist on making at least the dessert. Pecan pie, peach cobbler, those things you learn to make all your life. My routine is simple and peaceful. I wake up early, make my coffee with fresh bread that I buy at the local bake shop. I sit in the blue armchair in the living room, the one my son gave me as a gift, and pick up my crochet. I spend the whole morning there making little doilies, rugs, those little decorative things that the neighbors order. It's not to earn money, no. It's because I like it. It's because my hands need to create beautiful things after all they have been through. In the afternoon, sometimes I go to the church to pray. I always give thanks. I give thanks for having survived. I give thanks for my son, for my grandchildren, for my great-granddaughter, for the simple yet dignified life we built. Sometimes, when I'm alone here at home and I look out the window at the brick street, the neighbors passing by, the children playing, I remember that isolated farm. I remember that room where I suffered so much. I remember the steel girdles, the pain, the fear. But I don't get stuck in those memories, my darling. I look at them like someone looking at a storm that has passed. It hurt, yes, it hurt. It left scars, yes, it left scars, but it passed. And most importantly, I won. I won because I survived. I won because I raised my son with love and dignity. I won because I didn't let that man's wickedness destroy the good in me. I won because today I am free, truly free. My son James, that 4-year-old man who works every day at the cabinetry shop, who cares for his family with affection, who never raised his voice to anyone, who respects his wife and children, he is my victory. He is the proof that love conquers hate, that life conquers death, that good always conquers evil in the end. Today, when I hold my great-granddaughter Layla in my lap, and she looks at me with those curious little eyes and asks, "Grandma, tell me a story?" I tell beautiful stories. I tell about brave princesses, about heroes who defeat dragons, about happy endings, because she doesn't need to know about the darkness I lived through. She only needs to know about the light that we won. And that light is real, my dears. That light exists. It's here in this humble little house in Riverbend, in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's in my crochet, in the hug of my grandchildren, in the coffee my son shares with me every day. It's in my freedom to open the window when I want, to go out on the street when I want, to sleep in peace, knowing that no one will open my bedroom door in the middle of the night. This is my life today, and I am grateful for every second of it. My dears, if you have made it this far and heard my whole story, I want to tell you one thing. You are not alone. If you are going through something similar, if you are trapped somewhere, if someone is hurting you, if you think there is no way out, listen to what this 82-year-old grandma has to tell you. I thought I would die on that farm. I thought I would never be free. I spent years believing that that was my life, that there was nowhere to run, that no one would help me. But I survived, and if I survived, you can too. For months, That man tried to crush my son with iron and leather, tried to make him disappear before he was born. But my baby resisted. Every day he remained alive inside, even while being crushed, was a victory. Every heartbeat of his little heart against those girdles was a scream of, "I will live." And he lived. Against all odds, he lived. If you have listened to my story, then take hold of this core truth. Light always conquers darkness, and survival is not just an action, but a brave choice. I spent 7 years in shadow, believing I would die on that farm, crushed by a man's malice. But I was wrong. My son James taught me the greatest lesson. Even when you are being crushed, you can still fight to exist. If you are hearing this and feel trapped in any form, remember that walls can crumble. Never surrender to the lie that you have no way out. Find the light, no matter how small, in your own soul and hold on to it fiercely. Don't let your wounds define you. Let freedom define you. Life has taught me that your very existence is a victory. Stand tall, hold your head high, and proclaim, "I have survived, and I am a victor." If this story has touched your heart, please show your support. Hit that subscribe button to spread this hope to others who need to hear that. It gets better.